ever hear? You ever notice that the information that we're being fed doesn't always add up to the truth? Do you ever look out your window at night when the rain's falling down? You ever look down the street and wonder what is going on around you? You ever look out at night and ask yourself, is this all that I am? Where am I? What am I? Is this all there is? Is this real life? As technology continues to bring us closer together, it also tears us further apart. We watch the skies and look at the planet around us and its natural beauty as it continues to march forward on and on and on, unending, unceasing, unwavering. And yet our world, everything that we've built, crumbles around us. We wonder, is this it? Is there more? There's gotta be. We can search, we want to learn, we want to understand, we want to see all that we can see, know all that we can know. We want to look out there, we want to peek behind the veil, we want to ask the questions that nobody will answer. We want to light those fires, the sparks that ignite a curiosity in us. And we ask ourselves, what is out beyond all of that, beyond the edge of reality? Good evening. What is going on, everybody? It's Kaiser. It is Wednesday. It is the witching hour. It is everything that you have come to know on this channel, and it is a good time. Tonight, we are going to be talking about Halloween. We're going to be talking about all kinds of interesting things tonight, and I am so glad to be bringing you all this. This is a stream. This is a whole thing that I have been having in the works. This has been in the pipeline for a long time coming. And I am so excited that I get to bring it all to you. You guys are going to enjoy this one. And let me just tell y'all, everything you thought that you knew about Halloween, about, its origins, where it comes from, it's all a lie. Everything you know about Halloween is wrong. Yes, I realize that's a bold statement. Kaiser, how can you possibly say that? I mean, there's so many of, official bits of documentation and evidence and all this blah, blah, blah. Yeah. All a construct. And you're going to find out exactly how and why tonight. So, all right. Starting off, as folks are filing in, so going around, seeing how everybody is. Murph's Turf, always happy to see you there, Murph. And we've got Short Order Cook 1. Hey, Kaiser. Hi, everyone. Awesome to have you there, Short Order Cook. And HT, what's going on? Volstorm, let's rock. Yes. Hey, buddy. How you doing? Good to see you. Good to see you. Gigi, always a pleasure. Good to see you there. Mexican Vader, hi peeps. 'Tis a spoopy episode tonight. Yes, it is. It's going to be a lot to unpack. And I'm so glad I get to share it with all of you out there. Cool Gamer, what's going on, buddy? Awesome. And Mrs. K. Griff, hey, awesome. Thank you so much, Mrs. K. Griff. And don't forget to hit the like button, or I'm sure. Okay, yeah. Thank you there, Mrs. K. Griff. Awesome to have you. So I'm hoping my voice holds out through this entire thing, but yeah, who knows? We'll see. Probably not doing myself any favors there. All right. There we go. All right, folks. It has been an interesting time. Like I said, this is an episode that I have been waiting to do for a long time. And there's so much to unpack here. There's no way we could do it all in one episode. But this episode in particular is going to focus in on Halloween, the celebration, the worldwide celebrations, I should say, regarding the Day of the Dead, the Festival of the Dead, and how every single culture on Earth happens to have their own Festival of the Dead, all within a 3-day window of time. Well, most of them anyway. And trust me, we'll get into El Dia de los Muertos. And I apologize because I am terrible at pronunciation. So go easy on me. Yeah, it was a bit of a drop out of Spanish class. So my bad, guys. Also, not easy on the vocal cords. There we go. So, this leads to a lot of questions. And trust me, there will be plenty of time for Q&A. So, whether you're catching this live or you're on the replay crew, if you haven't already done so, please definitely go ahead, starting out, hit that like button. If you haven't actually subscribed to me before and you like what I do, hit that subscribe because we got plenty of stuff like this. And we do this same kind of show every Wednesday, same time, 9 p.m. Eastern. We cover some pretty wild topics around here. Also, feel free to go check out the back catalog if you want to also watch some of the backed episodes of this show, because there's a lot that we've covered. And of course, I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge all of you wonderful people out there, all of my amazing viewers and followers, and just saying thank you all so very much. Thank you, thank you, thank you from the absolute bottom of my heart. Because this week, we hit another milestone with the channel. We hit 700 subscribers here over on Kaiser Pineapple. And I could not do any of this without all of you. And I am so thrilled that we get to do this. We get to keep going. Currently, we are at 706 subscribers. That is amazing. And I am so happy and thrilled that all of you are here. Hey, what's going on, Jude? Liked and shared. Thank you so much. All right. And as always, because I don't like to usually grift in the middle of my shows and whatnot, here's the thing, folks. This channel, everything that I do is directly supported by you, the viewers. And I cannot tell you how much I appreciate everything that you guys do. And seriously, if you want to continue on, if you want to support the channel, there is no requirement whatsoever. But hey, feel free to pick up a membership. Feel free to, drop a little something in the super chat, anything at all. It's great. I appreciate every single one of you. Nothing is required, but everything is appreciated. Seriously. And it all goes right back into making better content and more of it for all of you out there. And speaking of which, just picked up a brand new member to the channel, Jude Curio, member for 1 month. Awesome. Oh, sorry, that was member for 1 month. Awesome. That's hard to believe it's been a month already. Jeez. Good Lord. Oh man, I mean, so cool. And I'm just so thrilled that about this. And yep, there we go. Fixed it. And Jude kicking us off here with a $10 super chat. You deserve it. Thank you so much there, Jude. You're awesome. I can't express how much I appreciate y'all. Especially, and I mean, to my regulars, especially Jude and Gigi and Miss K, Griff, Murph, all of y'all that are out there that are always here. Love all of y'all. You're amazing. First Trip says, Kaiser, the lighting in your office is amazing. So, strangely enough, so I've actually just got like a fire background on the TV up here. And then I've just got my little ring light to illuminate the face. And then I've got some, just some fun little stuff in the background. But yeah, going to be doing some cool things with some lighting here before long. That's going to be something else there. Ms. K. Griff says, yes, very cool lighting. I need that lighting when I set up my office. Well, there you go. And Gigi with 1 month super chat, or 1 month anniversary chat. Gonna get 1,000 subs before Christmas. Yes, I am driving hard to get my channel to 1,000 subscribers. I would love to have it by Christmas. That would be amazing. So, as always, folks, definitely share this out. Send it to people that you think might enjoy it. And also, feel free to, go out there on the Twitters, X, whatever they want to call it this week. And there are already links to this show. Just definitely, if you can, repost it, share it. It's great. I appreciate you. All right. So already we are almost 15 minutes in, and I got to be honest with you. This is big. This is probably okay. Now, look, I know the UFO streams and whatnot, and some of the stuff talking about like the David Grush, like the live congressional hearing. That was big, but we have a lot to cover tonight. And as I said, there's going to be so much more like regarding this exact topic and like a lot of like the background behind it that's going to come out. I'm going to have some required viewing and reading for y'all because all this stuff is out there and it's getting more traction, and the actual stuff is incredibly fascinating. Oh, what's going on? MLS Law says, how long are you going? At least a good probably 2 hours, depending on how things go. Maybe more. Maybe, I don't know. Depends on how long the old vocal cords last, because still fighting a little bit of a cold. But otherwise, I'm kicking it as long as I can. I would say at least 2 hours minimum. Average, I usually go close to 3. Let's see. There we go. And MLS says, cool, I have a few more minutes on this closing. Awesome. I say, would love to have all your viewers come and hang out with me because this is gonna be big. This is one that I am excited for. And yes, I know I've already said that a couple of times, but I cannot contain within myself how much I am excited for this. And Mr. Scott J87, hello, Red Leader. Awesome. Okay, well, good to see you there, Mr. Scott J87. Welcome to the channel. I don't think I've seen your name pop in before, so great. Happy to have you on board. Thank you so much for coming on by. And we have not even gotten started yet, so you're coming in at the perfect time. All right. So, I guess we should start tonight. If we're going to start it, we might as well start at the beginning. So, what do we all know about Halloween? So let's go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and throw a poll in the chat. I would love to go ahead and get y'all's opinion here. So, what have you been told is the origin of Halloween? Okay. And Festival Dead. Corporations made it up, and something else. All right, there we go. Polls up in the chat there. And so, yeah, I went ahead and threw that out. So everybody going over to the chat, there is a poll, kind of just a quick little question there. Oh yes, guys, I'm fine. I was just putting together a quick little poll there. Sometimes I have to squint a little bit. All right, so the poll is up. So this way, kind of, what do you think, or like, what have you been told? What have you been taught is the origin of Halloween? Because by the end of tonight, you might be surprised. Now, I'm not saying any of these answers are necessarily wrong, but I'm also saying they're not all entirely right. So, with that being said, let's get into it, folks. All right. So, with that being on there, we've got 5 votes in there. We got 10 people watching here on the tubes. And yeah, feel free to go ahead and jump in on that. Once we hit the, however many people I see are viewing and how many people that have answered the chat, we'll go ahead and close the poll out. All right. So there's a quote that I heard whenever I first started delving into this, when I started pulling together resources. One of my main sources for a lot of this information is someone, to me, is kind of like a rock star. Kind of, to me, is somebody that I honestly hope to one day meet, because I really want to pick this guy's brain. And that man is Randall Carlson. So for those of you who don't know, Randall Carlson is a scientist. He's a geologist. He's done a lot of, work just studying ancient myths and information. The guy's got a fascinating background. And a long time ago, he came up with an idea. He was looking at a section of the channeled scablands up in Montana. And he just kind of was looking down into this great big just channel cut straight through the bedrock, 3 miles on each side of this gorge, with the river running down below it, like way down the very bottom. And he thought, something about this doesn't fit. So that began a journey. And Randall's research has been unparalleledly interesting. And it's gotten to the point where he's starting to finally get recognition for his hard work. And he's pulled together a lot of other big names in the scientific community, people who have done their own independent research and kind of looked at things from a different perspective and gone, wait a minute, some things don't add up in ancient history. And that's when we get into some of his studies into ancient folklore. So there's a great quote that he pulled together that I had never heard before, and I tried to find like a version of this that I could throw up on screen. I don't have one. I tried looking. There's not one out there. The quote is by J. Ralston Skinner from his book, The Source of Measure, from 1875. Quote, "The ancient knowledge will again abound and overflow as water up on the earth. The remains of this knowledge are everywhere about us, in everyday use, imperfect." That's interesting. So where we get into all this is we ask ourselves, all right, we have this holiday. We have Halloween. And we have to ask ourselves, where did this holiday come from? So, to go ahead and start us off, I did pull this, and this is actually a definition from the Episcopal Church on All's Hallowed Eve. I'm going to try and fit this in there. It doesn't quite format correctly, so. All right. Let me actually go do this, so that way you can see everything there. The popular name for this festival is Halloween. It was the eve of Samhain, a pagan Celtic celebration at the beginning of winter and the first day of the new year. This time of the ingathering of the harvest and the approach of winter apparently provided a reminder of human mortality. It was a time when the souls of the dead were said to return to their homes. Bonfires were set on hilltops to frighten away evil spirits. Samhain was a popular festival at the time when the British Isles were converted to Christianity. The church adopted its times of celebration for Christian use by observing All Saints' Day on November 1st and All's Hallowed Eve on the evening of October 31st. What's going on, AP? Good to see you. So that is how we get the more traditional understanding of what is Halloween like within the church. So then we go to this. This is actually courtesy of the Encyclopedia Britannica. This is the definition for the celebration known as Samhain. And no, it's not Sam Hain, it's Samhain. That is the actual pronunciation. All right. Excuse me. Samhain, Celtic end of summer, also spelled Samian. In ancient Celtic religion, one of the most important and sinister calendar festivals of the year. At Samhain, held on November 1st, the world of the gods was believed to be made visible to humankind, and the gods played many tricks on their mortal worshippers. It was a time fraught with danger, charged with fear, and full of supernatural episodes. Sacrifices and propitiations of every kind were thought to be vital, for without them, the Celts believed that they would not prevail over the perils of the season or counteract the activities of the deities. Samhain was an important precursor to Halloween. Oh, geez. And Jason J saying, breaking mass casualty incident declared as active. Pew Pew strikes multiple locations. Oh, geez. Currently, numerous emergency personnel and other authorities are responding to an active queuing in Lewiston, Maine. Reports indicate at least 16 people, possibly more. Oh, geez. That's bad. Say, yeah, Jason, definitely keep us posted there, buddy. Say, definitely going to be, praying for everybody involved in that. I mean, I know everybody kind of gets a little triggered at that sometimes. Sorry, that was a colloquialism. Yeah. You have Allstorm. So about that festival. Okay. Yeah, back on the rails. And so in more of the modern day, something has kind of grown up around Halloween itself. And popularized actually of all things, the Peanuts comic strip with Charlie Brown. So it was called Lessons from the Great Pumpkin. This was by Eric Koningsberg, September 22nd, 2011. There's a particular quote in here that I want to get to. The true genius of the Great Pumpkin may be the way it sends up other holiday parables by having a character seek a deeper meaning in the sole holiday that has no real lesson to teach. Is there any day we celebrate that is empty of moral or historical significance? Halloween exists today simply so the kids can dress up, run around after dark, eat too much candy, and scare the pants off one another. So specifically what he's talking about here when he talks about the Great Pumpkin is the character of Linus in Peanuts. And the character Linus, he's looking for a more substantive version of a reason to care about Halloween. So, hey, what's going on, traveling fools? Good to see you. Yo, yo, yo. Ballstorm, it's the Great Pumpkin. It's rising out of the pumpkin patch. Yep. All right. So that kind of brings us into okay. So there's a definite mixed vibe going on here. So we have the mixing of the original pagan traditions that had been around already for a long time, and those had apparently been adopted by the church. The church, of course, wrapped those into everything. Pop culture eventually took over. It was, of course, then popularized and essentially corporatized to what it is today, using a lot of the old iconography of the time. And going back to our poll from earlier, I'm going to go ahead and end the poll. So, what have you been told about the origin of Halloween? So, 50% of you said pagan festival of the dead. 25% of you said religious holiday, All's Hallowed Eve. 12% said corporations made it up. 12% said something else. All right. So again, none of those are wrong. None of those are wrong answers. There's a lot more to unpack in this. So, digging into everything, we have a very odd sort of, for lack of a better term, there's an odd pedigree to this instance. It's like Family Feud, only good answers here. Yep, pretty much. All right. So going back over here, we're going to pull up this article. So it is Wikipedia, but trust me, I've got better sources than this. We'll get into it. Okay. So Festival of the Dead. Festival of the Dead, or Feast of Ancestors, is held by many cultures throughout the world in honor of the recognition of deceased members of the community, generally occurring after the harvest in August, September, October, or November. In many cultures, a single event, Festival of the Dead, lasting up to 3 days, was held at the end of October, the beginning of November. Examples include the Peruvians, the Pacific Islanders, the people of Tonga Islands, the ancient Persians, ancient Romans, and other nations of Europe. The country of Mexico celebrates Dia de Muertos from October 31st to November 2nd. So now you have to ask yourself, what is going on here that literally all of these different peoples, these different cultures, separated by thousands of miles? There was no mass transit. There was no way of fast traveling. Traveling any direction and to any place took months, if not sometimes years, to get to where you were going. How did these people, all of them, have traditions regarding a Festival of the Dead that go back beyond recorded history? How do they all have the same thing if they're all so separated? And some of them, especially the Pacific Islanders, are so isolated from the rest of the world. How do they all have this? And how is it all within the same 3-day time frame? Every single one of them. It's a fascinating question to ask. And well, thankfully, we've begun to try and start putting the pieces together. So, to this specific work here, we're going to do a little bit of reading up, and we're going to watch a little bit of a video here. we'll have plenty of clips and other little videos to intersperse through here. But yeah, this is interesting here. So this gentleman here, this is Robert Grant Halliburton. And so June 3rd, 1831 to 6th of March, 1901, was a Canadian lawyer and anthropologist. He became famous after founding the Canada First organization that saw English Canadian society as the heirs of not good, not a good idea, Northmen. And that, yeah. So, yeah, he's not a good guy. Not a good guy. But let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater here, because what he did was he traveled the world and he definitely did some research. He started looking at all these ancient cultures, all these different people from all over the world, and he started asking questions like, why do all these people have the same holiday? Mexican Vader says, same thing happens when people's religious beliefs, pagan or Abrahamic, being vastly similar, even though they have less than nothing to do with each other. That's definitely, not wrong. All right. So we're going to go ahead and watch this short little bit here. Yeah, I say short, it's probably close to 5 or 6 minutes, but this is actually taken from a larger show. I do highly recommend you guys give it a chance. Go watch it. We might actually do a watch party one night in my Discord server on it, so definitely something to keep in mind here. So, yeah. All right, here we go.
Materials for the History of Man. Number 1, The Festival of the Dead, was published in 1868. So having had rather unexpectedly to visit England in 1859, I thought it advisable to prepare a brief paper for the Society of Antiquaries of London, and accordingly selected customs connected with All Souls' Day as a subject. On outlining it in England, it was apparent that the coincidences in the observance of this festival by different nations were much more striking than I had supposed. A new and most startling fact was discovered when I came to read over the paper I had prepared. It was singular that the Festival of the Dead amongst the ancient Peruvians was celebrated on the same day as by the Spaniards, that is, on All Souls' Day, November 2nd. I had also considered this merely as a curious coincidence, but it was apparent on reading over the results of my investigations that the festival was generally observed in November south as well as north of the equator, a fact so remarkable that it was evident that whatever could be the cause, it must be something hitherto unknown. So, from 1859 until the present year, so this is 9 years later, all the leisure that could be spared from public and private engagements has been devoted to the inquiry. It was evident that the uniformity could not have been caused or been preserved by any calendar now known to us, and that the festival must originally have been regulated by some visible sign or mark that nature had supplied to our ancestors and the Peruvians.
Okay, that's a big point that we need to make something. So again, this is Halliburton looking into this information. He noticed that these cultures that are, vastly, they're from vastly different sides of the earth and isolated, have a similar holiday. So then he started to investigate, because he started to find a very strange similarity with a number of other cultures across the world. Miss K. Griff says, my mother-in-law got super pissy and yelled, "That's pagan" at me. I threw salt over my shoulder. She's fun. Okay. AP says, new religion always uses the prior religions of the areas, helps to convert the population to a new religion. Not wrong. Not wrong. Okay, this video is super cool. It's also giving end of the world vibes. Oh, trust me, it does. Because it has to do with the end of the world. the end of the world that happened a long time ago. Do I have your attention yet?
In European calendars, the last day of October and the first and second days of November are designated as the festivals of All Halloween, All Saints, and All Souls. Though they have hitherto never attracted any special attention and have not been supposed to have been connected with each other, they originally constituted but one commemoration of 3 days' duration, known amongst all nations as the Festival of the Dead or the Feast of the Ancestors. It is now, or was formerly, observed at or near the beginning of November by the Peruvians, the Hindus, the Pacific Islanders, the people of the Tonga Islands, the Australians, the ancient Peruvians, the ancient Egyptians, the northern nations of Europe, and continued for 3 days among the Japanese, the Hindus, the Australians, the ancient Romans, and the ancient Egyptians. The startling fact that this feast was celebrated among the ancient Peruvians at the same period and on the same day that Christians solemnize the commemoration of the dead, at once drew my attention to the question, how is this uniformity in the time of observance preserved, not only in far distant quarters of the globe, but also through that vast lapse of time since the Indo-European first inherited this primeval festival from a common source? In the most ancient calendar in India, the year commenced in the month of November, which bears the name Kartigui, which means the Pleiades, a constellation which must, by its rising or setting at that time, once have regulated the primitive year. We find also that in the month of October, the Hindus, like ourselves, have 3 days which are connected with the Festival of the Dead. In the ancient Egyptian calendar, the same resemblance can be traced between the name of the Pleiades, which among the Hebrews and Chaldeans is Athorai, with that of the Egyptian month of November, which is Athor. The Arab name for the Pleiades, Ataria, also suggests a resemblance.
Okay. Are you starting to pick up what I'm putting down? And yes, Randall is amazing at this. And yes, that is Randall speaking. And he is an amazing orator. He just has this voice that just kind of sucks you in. I've got to be honest. But yes. So, you have a couple of very important things that just came up in here. So, you have Athorai, Athor, the Arab name for the Pleiades, and Atoria. Now, there's a slight etymological little tidbit you need to be starting to pick up there. I don't want to spoil it, but it's going to make your head spin.
And I will suggest here that these names for the Pleiades, which I think you're seeing now, Athorai, the Hebrews and the Chaldeans, Athor, Egyptian, and Ataria, Arabic. Now, if you look at the word Ataria here, what do you see here? T-A-U-R. Does that suggest anything? Does it? Yes, very good. Excellent. You get an attaboy for that. Halliburton goes on. Let us turn from the islands of the Pacific to Peru. And there we find the primitive calendar of 2 seasons, marked by a New Year's festival of the dead occurring in November and celebrated at precisely the same time as in Europe and in Polynesia. The event in which it occurs, says Rivero, quotes, is called Ayamark, from Aya, a corpse, and Marca, carrying in arms, because they celebrated the solemn festival of the dead with tears, lugubrious songs, and plaintive music. It is worthy of remark that the feast was celebrated among the ancient Peruvians at the same period and on the same day that Christians solemnized the commemoration of the dead. Is it not somewhat startling to find that Australian savages at or near the time of Halloween, All Saints, and All Souls also consecrate 3 days to the memory of the dead as a vernal New Year's celebration, regulated by the time-honored Pleiades? And like the Northern Festival of the Dead beginning in the evening, or with a Halloween, in the Tonga Islands, which belong to the Fiji group, the Festival of Anachi, a vernal first fruits celebration, and also a commemoration of the dead, takes place towards the end of October and commences at sunset. So here is a compilation of some of the partial list of ancient cultures observing a festival of the dead in late October, November. And
So, real quick, because you can't really see all of this, we'll kind of stop here so that way you can see this. So, in the Judeo Christian calendar, Halloween, All Saints' Day, All Souls' Day, 3-day observance. And then you have the Celtic and Druidical Samhain. That's like the Anglo-Saxons, the Dutch, and the Swedes. They called November was called the Blood Month. Egypt, they had the slaying of Osiris, the Lord of the Dead. That was in Egypt. Assyria, the month of is like Arasamna. Persia, Mordred month. Is like Mordred month. Peru, Ayamarca festival. Polynesia, Feast of Ancestors honoring the dead. Mexico, Day of the Dead. India, Festival of Durga. Mayans, Tzoltemnoch, the counterpart to Lucifer. Mayans, say the like in Australian Aboriginals, you've got the Feast of the Dead and Ancestors. In Japan, you have the Feast of Lathrans. So yeah, 3 days, bonfires, extensive rituals. All these things happen right around the same rough time frame. This 3-day period. AP says, according to some peoples in areas of the world is already in the 5th or so civilization cycle. Interesting. Elifant says, dang it, I missed the beginning of this. Don't worry, we're still getting into it. Let's see. Elifant says, Day of the Dead is beautiful. Jude, you know where I'm going with this. Comet. Someone's been doing their homework.
And you can see this down the left is the column of some of the, and this is not all inclusive either. But you'll be able to go over this on your own time and look at this. So, and here we go, another very important connection in all of this. A remarkable fact, however, was incidentally forced upon my attention, that the memory of the deluge was by the Mexicans, the Egyptians, and the Jews associated with the same time of the year and by the two latter nations as well as in Greece. And with that day, I had found some very peculiar superstitions connected in the Pacific Islands as well as among most ancient nations. Among the Aztecs as well as the Egyptians, the deluge was commemorated at the beginning of the year of the Pleiades, when that constellation culminated at midnight. Now, this is a very interesting connection, which brings us right back to something that the study of which I've been involved with for decades. And this is the myths and legends of the world-destroying floods, the cataclysmos of the ancient Greeks, the Noahide flood of the ancient Hebrews, the Christians and the Muslims. And so now here we have some interesting connections, that the flood is celebrated as having occurred at this time of year. The universal ancient tradition, the Day of the Dead, celebrated at this time of year. As Halliburton points out, there must have been some commonality amongst this, something to bring this coincidence in time together around some event, which he assumed was a natural event. And then he learned that the Pleiades rises and culminates at midnight. It rises essentially at sundown in late October, early November, and by midnight it's culminating, it's crossing the local meridian. So if you're in the northern hemisphere, if you're facing due south, you would look directly above, depending on how high would be, depending on your latitude, but let's say at 45 degrees up, where the plane of the ecliptic is, we see the constellation of the Pleiades, which traditionally is placed at the shoulder of the bull, the shoulder of Taurus, the bull. And I think that this is going back even to the days of the Egyptians. We know that Taurus the bull was a recognized, defined constellation as long as 16,000 years ago, because we see it depicted on the cave paintings, with the Pleiades very distinctly shown as a cluster of stars.
Okay.
We're starting to get into something very interesting here. So they're saying now 16,000 years ago, cave paintings from our ancestors are all showing a cluster of stars that matches up perfectly with the Pleiades, the shoulder of the bull. Now, I don't know about all of y'all, but when I think of ancient civilizations and ancient cultures, I don't think of people living in caves doing cave paintings and cave drawings as astronomers. And yet, that is exactly what we are beginning to see in the actual geological record, the actual history that we actually are now starting to uncover is suggesting that our ancient ancestors, far removed from us, were in touch with the night sky and had already seen these same constellations and drawn the same sorts of commonalities that we have today. That's rather a striking and interesting thing to really think about. So, again, I mean, and think of how many times in every other culture that you can think of that when you really get down to it, again, all of these cultures had a knowledge and understanding of astronomy and the stars far, way further back than we ever could have imagined. And yep, absolutely. Jude says they didn't have internet. That's for sure. Shorter to cook. Our history is in the stars. Yep, it's all connected. AP says the Isle of Skye has numerous drawings of planetary bodies. Yes. Excuse me. Elephant says they use the sky for everything, telling time, seasons, counting seasons, days, weeks, etc. They use the sky to tell them when to plant and grow food. Yes, absolutely they did. Our ancient ancestors were a lot smarter than we give them credit for. And it just leaves us asking so many questions. How did we have this knowledge this far back? It just kind of makes you wonder, wait, what's going on here? Excavator says, if only the rocks and stones around us could talk, oh, the stories they could tell us. Yes, abso-freaking-lutely. In some ways, they are. I've got more, and trust me, there are some stones that are telling some very interesting stories coming up throughout the show. One in particular, I guarantee is probably going to leave you with your mouth on the floor, with your jaw on the floor. All right. So again, now I have to draw a very quick distinction here. So if we really go back to history, when I was in school, I think I was like in 6th grade, we took a world geography, world history course. And according to the textbooks that I read at that time, the conventional wisdom and knowledge was that the oldest civilization was the Sumerians, about 6,000 BC. So you really go back, so the dawn of really human civilization is about 6,000 to 8,000 years ago. Now, that goes to a very specific region, which is kind of, I think now is Mesopotamia, so around Turkey. And you had the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers. that was kind of known as the cradle of humanity. But what we're finding now is that humans predated that time frame in a much, much older fashion. And now, as you'll find out, we're finding evidence of civilizations that goes back thousands of years, tens of thousands. And academia is doing everything that they can to shush that because it flies in the face of their narrative. But science is getting to the point now where the evidence is mounting and they can no longer ignore it. We are truly living in an interesting time. It really is. Mrs. K. Griff says, that's really the only reason I would want to time travel. I don't need to be able to interact. Time view, I just want to see history happen. Yes. Ellie fossils tell stories, so the so do the makeups of rocks. Indeed, they do. Those rocks all have a story to tell. AP, able to build structures to this day that befuddle even the smartest scientists. Yep. Scientists. Elifant says, don't forget that the planet changed into what it looks like now. Continents were different, countries, etc. Exactly. Hey, Irish. Yep. So cool. Yep. Oh, it's gonna get better. Trust me. All right.
We now turn to Mexico, and there we find that the Great Festival of the Mexican Cycle was held on the 17th of November and was regulated by the Pleiades. It began at sunset, and at midnight, as that constellation approached the zenith, a human victim was offered up to avert the dread calamity which they believed impended over the human race. This belief was so remarkable that I cannot omit a reference to it here. They had a tradition that at that time the world had been previously destroyed, and they dreaded lest a similar catastrophe would, at the end of a cycle, annihilate the human race. Greswell has devoted several chapters and much learning to the 17th day of November to show how remarkable a landmark it has always been through a long lapse of centuries. Even among the Persians, the same day was peculiarly venerated. In the ancient Persian calendar, the 17th day of November was held so sacred that all favors asked of rulers were granted on that day. So now we have the second date that's kind of get thrown into the mix, which initially might seem to complicate things, but once we begin to dive deeper into the details, we'll begin to understand exactly why we have this thing associated with October 31st, November 1st, and the significance of November 17th.
All right, real quick there, I wanted to just call attention to this. So Irish did say something interesting. You heard the joke about Egyptian pyramids and Mexican pyramids. Aliens built Egypt, but Mexicans built those. No one questions of it. Exactly. But now we're finding out there's pyramids in Indonesia. There's pyramids and megalithic structures in Sicily and in Turkey and in Bosnia and so many, and in China. Pyramids everywhere. But we only ever talk about the ones in the pyramids of Giza, which is completely discounting the ones in Central America and South America, which all correspond to the exact same thing. Interesting. And real quick, Murph being an absolute boss here, dropping 5 gifted memberships. Thank you so much, Murph's Turf. And if you are one of the lucky people to pick those up, hey, give Murph a thank you, because that's awesome. Mexican Vader, Irish, Latania, Mrs. K. Griff, This Way Up, and Just Dawn, all getting those gifted memberships. Very cool. Thank you so much for that, Murph. Appreciate it as always. And Nicholas Starro Trial Watch. Hey, what's going on, brother? Hey, this is a good one. I'm glad you're here for this. This is going to be an interesting show. All right. China. Yeah. Irish also says there's a guy saying oldest is in Central South America. Yep. I know the one you're talking about, but I can't remember his name off the top of my head right now. Elephant says the Vatican didn't try to hide the ones in Sicily. Well, they're not. It's not a pyramid, but it is a megalithic structure. Nicholas says Swedish All's Hallowed Day is the first Sunday in November, but used to be on a fixed date, November 1st, but the government pushed it to Saturday to get one extra day of work. Yeah, there you go. Let's see here. All right. We're going to go ahead and continue on with this here.
Even tradition has been unable to preserve the history of this day that must be sought for in the very earliest ages of the world. In the mysteries of Isis, the goddess of agriculture and of death, the funereal part of the ceremonies, the lamentations and search for Osiris, which commenced on the 17th and ended on the 19th. Among the Greeks, besides existing in other ceremonies, the primeval festival of the dead appears under a veil of mythology in all the ancient mysteries, but above all, in the greatest of them, the Eleusinian. But now, I'm going to show you something where I think you'll begin to see the interconnections here. So I want to call your attention first to the Taurids, which is the name of the meteor stream. Its cometary source, Comet Encke, and it peaks twice, once in late June and again in early November. Peaks from November 1st to November 3rd, approximately. And the radiant point of the Taurids is very near Pleiades in the shoulder of the bull. In fact, it's almost like a bullseye on the Pleiades. And so we have this correlation between one of the great meteor streams that has existed over thousands of years and a yearly festival that was part of both recognition of the ancestors and the Day of the Dead, and it's part of this constellation of the bull. Also, I want you to look just below the Taurids, and you'll see the Leonids. So there you've got the bull and you've got the lion, two of the creatures depicted, one half of the four creatures that represent the apocalypse, shown on tympanums of cathedrals, shown in many different forms, many different places as the bull, the lion, the eagle, and the man. But notice the Leonids, cometary source, Temple Tuttle, and you notice the date that they peak.
November 17th.
Mm-hmm. So we have two of the great meteor streams peaking, each with these two dates. I think this is significant. So in the Great Pyramid, its secrets and mysteries revealed by Piazza Smythe.
We would pause there. So Irish Latana dropping another 5 gifted memberships to the Pineapple Crew. Thank you so much there, Irish. Definitely, y'all give her a thank you. And I see that those were picked up by Volstorm, HT, Libby, Salty Dog 78, and It's Me, Josie. Awesome. Thank you so much there, Irish. Appreciate you so much. AP mentions Olmecs, is it Olmec or Toltecs? Yep. In Central America, often forgotten civilizations. Yes. They are all connected somehow in all of this. Ms. K. Griff says, that's a bad day to work in healthcare. Yep. Font, all full moons are bad days to work in healthcare. Yeah. I know a few people who've done that, and yeah. And Nicholas with a 1 month member chat saying, whoa, I got a bonus member chat. Better not waste it. Awesome. Thank you so much, buddy.
Written in 1880, we find this. Now, hereupon, we may all well wonder how it came about that, according to the invaluable researches of Mr. Robert G. Halliburton of Halifax, Nova Scotia, that amongst the origines of almost all nations, and among many unaltered savage tribes still, such as the Australians, Fijians, Mexicans, and many others, people never reached by the Greeks or Romans, a similar beginning of the year to that described by Virgil is still perpetuated. The Pleiades, or the star group, chiefly characterizing for those nations the constellation of Taurus, being annually appealed to for that purpose. And I have a quote here from Virgil. Let me just jump back to that. If I pronounce this anywhere near the correct pronunciation, Candidatus oratus apparit cum cornibus unum Taurus. The constellation of the white bull with the golden horns, which opens the year. And here we have the Pleiades. And in the next slide, we have a traditional depiction of Taurus the bull, with the Pleiades occupying the shoulder of the bull. And here's an example of Taurus the bull with the Pleiades, not quite on the shoulder, welcome. But this painting has been dated to 14,500 BC, which is basically 16,500 years ago.
Now again, we have to note there, that is 16,500 years ago. Our ancestors knew about this. I don't know about y'all, but that that just gives me the willies. All right. So now we've seen this. We are aware of that. Now we have to begin to ask ourselves a very important question. Hey, what's going on, JKD Buck? Just got in here. Good to have you, buddy. Now, there is a location. This was fairly recent. And the discovery of this location only really just happened within really like the last, I believe, within the last 50 years. So it was discovered in 1963. The excavation was from 1995 to present and is still ongoing. And that location is called Göbekli Tepe. Now, from the outside, Göbekli Tepe may not look like much. I mean, Göbekli Tepe in the actual Turkish language where it's located at in Turkey means pot-bellied hill. And for the longest time, it looked like just a hill. But they started discovering artifacts there. They started discovering stones that were carved. And suddenly, after they started digging, this emerged. There we go. So this is Göbekli Tepe as it was a few years ago. This is before they put the big like tent around it to try and keep it protected from the elements. Say Göbekli Tepe today. All right, here's the inside of it today. So, now if you'll notice, this is a walkway that goes around the site. And you can see people actually up here. So this is massive. I mean, these are stone pillars that are 20 feet tall upwards of. They weigh upwards of probably nearly close to 20 tons. They're massive megalithic structures, these giant T-shaped pillars. And they are literally built into the side of this hill. But what's even more interesting is that on the same site, not very far away, they just excavated another site called Karahan Tepe. And now, using ground penetrating radar scans, they're finding that this entire hillside where Göbekli Tepe resides, there are over 20 other similar temples just like it built into this city, or built into this whole area. And what's fascinating is the date that we find, and the dates and information we find, is that each of these different iterations of this giant complex, they all have astronomical alignment. And in almost every single case, they almost all seem to align to the star Sirius, which is the brightest star in the sky. Now, that by itself is pretty wild. But hold on to your butts, because it's going to get a whole lot more interesting. Because again, this site is just incredibly massive. And there are figures, there are statues, there are all kinds of these things all over the place. And they're still digging up more every single day. All right. So okay. Yep, Sirius is a great song. Alan Parsons Project. Yes, I do love that. I do love Alan Parsons Project. Gigi says the way the carvings were done there is amazing. Yes, abso-freaking-lutely they are. Now, here's where things get very interesting. Because when you're really looking into this, something that to note. As near as we can tell, Göbekli Tepe was built about 12,800 years ago. And it seemed that it was operational for a period of about 1,000 years, between 11,000 or about 12,800 to 11,600 years ago. And then suddenly, for some reason, the whole site was buried. Now, I want to make sure that I am very careful about saying this. This site was not buried by neglect or, just being abandoned. No, or some cataclysm. This entire site, as they're finding the way that the stones and the debris was packed down in there, this site was intentionally buried by humans about 11,600 years ago. So this entire site was built, it was used, and then it was buried. And that has led a lot of people to question and ask why. Well, you've already heard some of what Randall has already been talking about. Let's start to draw the connections and pull things together. Elifant, you mean by buried by a great flood or something? No, I mean it was buried intentionally by the people who built it. As in they built this thing and then they filled it in. It's basically a time capsule. It's an ancient time capsule that was intentionally buried so that one day a future civilization, near as we can tell, that a future civilization would come along and dig it up. Does that start to get you a little bit questioning on what the hell's going on here? Yeah. So, we're going to take a little bit of a stroll here, because what I want to talk about next is Pillar 43 of Enclosure D. Pillar 43 of Enclosure D in Göbekli Tepe. All right. Here we go. So this is Pillar 43. And Elifant asks, have they tested the soil yet? Yes. They have tested the soil, they've tested the rocks and the pillars, everything. Everything dates to this time frame, 12,800 to 11,600 years ago. That's a very specific window of time, and I'll tell you why. Well, we're looking at it there, Shorter Cook. I'd even question that explanation. I wonder if they will find it written in stones or something. Well, here it is. This is it. Written in stone. Now, to the casual eye, this may not look like much. But let me tell you, this is a lot. There is so much information going on here. It's going to make your head spin. So you have 3 different birds. You have a scorpion. You have 3 what look like handbags up here. And that leads you to kind of wonder, what is this? Well, thankfully, somebody has started to do the work on this. So, let me go ahead and bring this up. Göbekli Tepe's Pillar 43, an astronomical interpretation. So here, let's go ahead and make this extra biggened. And let me go ahead and pull myself down here. You start to notice something? Suddenly you notice that these carvings that seem kind of what, to the casual observer might be a little abstract, all line up with celestial bodies. They all line up with the night sky. And right there inside the scorpion is Scorpio. So using that as a waypoint, they were able to start looking at this, and they figured by laying this image over a star map from around the time frame that they were able to kind of look at it, they were able to determine that yes, in fact, this is an astronomical map. But not only is it a map, this is not just a map. Get ready, because I'm about to blow your minds. This is a timestamp. This pillar is a timestamp. Nicholas Starro asks, is it lined up with Scorpio of today or where the stars were 12,000 years ago? Yes, it is lined up with where those stars were 12,000 years ago. It perfectly aligns. Archaeoastronomy is kind of a new field, but they're able to, with turning back the clock on the processions of the stars in our galaxy, they're able to figure out that, yes, this all matched up perfectly. Now, I mean, the actual difference between the star map, from 12,000 years ago and today is minor. It's a very subtle difference. But yeah, they were able to use this to date it. Now here's where things are going to get even crazier. notice here on the top of the T pillar. On the top of the T pillar here, there are these three symbols. They look kind of like handbags. What if we're not looking at handbags? What if we are looking at 1, 2, 3 sunrises? When you take this thought into consideration, you have 3 sunrises, and at this particular, with where these stars, these constellations are in the sky, that would mean that you have the solstices and the equinoxes, but you would have 3 of them. So it's like summer, winter, fall. So this is placing an interesting emphasis on the idea that somehow at this point in time, this timestamp, this is putting a face, this is putting a date stamp right around, get ready for this, this is putting a timestamp right around or close to the fall equinox over 12,000 years ago. So if this is a timestamp, now we have to ask ourselves, okay, what happened between 11,600 and 12,800 years ago? And that's actually quite simple to explain because we have the data. Now, as Randall explained, this time frame coincides with the Taurids, the Taurid meteor stream and the Leonid meteor stream right there in that time frame between October 31st and November 17th. What happened? So you have a meteor stream. You have this timestamp saying, hey, this is something bad happened all this time ago. And we have it down to a specific couple of weeks that it happened. We have this time frame between October 31st and November 17th, 12,800 years ago. What has been found is astonishing. Because twice a year, the Earth crosses through the Taurid meteor stream. I'm going to go ahead and show a real quick little short here. This is Randall Carlson again.
Sort of a graphic I put together to show the Taurid meteor stream, and this is based, there's 2 ellipses here, which goes back to the work of Fred Whipple way back in the 1940s, who was the first one to realize that the Taurid meteor stream was the byproduct of this ongoing fragmentation of an original giant comet. And then this third ring here is the orbit of the Earth. The green arrows show the direction of the orbit, so here's the orbit of the Earth. And here is the green arrows again show the direction of orbit of the stream. And you can see that the Earth's orbit crosses the stream late June, early July, right here. And then again, it crosses the stream around now, November, late October, early November. And this has led the Taurid stream to sometimes be referred to as the Halloween meteors because they peak right around Halloween.
Yep. Every year, same time, around Halloween, the Torrid meteor stream. We cross right through it. And so here's another video. This one is a short one. This is kind of a simulation of kind of like how the Earth crosses through the Torrids. And I'm big in that there. So you have the Earth. That's where the Torrids are. We just cross right through this stream of meteors for 3 days, twice a year, in June and in November. So that's quite fascinating. But what does it mean? All right. Well, let's go ahead and turn back the hands of time again. And let's talk about what happened 12,800 years ago. Yeah, that is scary, AP. It's terrifying. Because the way that I best heard it described is that trying to cross through this meteor stream without getting struck is like trying to navigate a 6-lane highway, like trying to cross a 6-lane highway blindfolded, going backwards, and trying not to hit anything at rush hour. It's almost impossible. The question is, because we see these Halloween meteors every year, when is something that's big enough going to be able to make it through our atmosphere? Because, spoiler alert, it's happened before. A lot. All right. So, turning back the clock to about 12,800 years ago, let's go to an appearance that Randall did, and let's actually let him just explain it himself. All right. And I'm hoping that, so this one's a little bit longer. And let's try this short one. We'll see how that goes. Okay. Oops. Present. Blow. There we go. The Younger Dryas event explained with Graham Hancock and Randall Carlson.
See, this event 12,800 years ago, we know now it was caused by fragments of a very large comet, and the work suggests that that comet may have been more than 100 kilometers in diameter, a small moon, which fragmented and broke up into multiple parts. And the evidence and the argument is that 12,800 years ago, several large bits of that debris fell out of the Torrid meteor stream and impacted with the Earth. When these impactors come in, they generate a huge amount of heat, and that was the liquidizing of a huge area of the North American ice cap instantly, and the floods that followed.
The sudden, rapid, catastrophic meltdown of the ice sheets, dumping millions of cubic kilometers of water back into the ocean basins.
10 million square miles of the Earth's surface, roughly Europe and China added together, was submerged by the rising sea levels.
Right.
Yeah, a mile high of ice.
Yeah.
Or even more than that in some cases. Over central Canada, it might have been as much as 2 miles.
2 miles.
2 miles of ice.
Just pushing across the ground like an eraser.
Exactly. And what is called ejecta, superheated ejecta, is thrown up into the upper atmosphere, and it falls down all over the continent, and it sets the world on fire.
It's nature gone chaotic and crazy on ultimate steroids. Here what you have to visualize is a tsunami sweeping over the land that's over 1,000 feet deep. And the water here was moving down. It's filling this basin. It's rushing in a great tsunami from the north of freshwater, meltwater coming off the ice sheet. And it's sweeping down over this land at probably 200 or 300 million cubic feet per second, which is an inconceivable amount of water. It's many times in excess of every river flowing on Earth, flowing today all at once. But you got to bear in mind, we're talking about, at the end of the last ice age, 120 roughly species of megafauna that disappeared, which is about equivalent to the same number of megafaunal species that inhabits the Earth today.
Well, it was a short period of time where something like 65% of the North American mammals went extinct?
75%.
75%.
Yeah.
There are interesting studies that coming out now showing that at least continental-wide, there was apparently a major human population crash exactly coincident with the megafaunal extinctions, because you had quarries that had been mined for centuries that are suddenly abandoned. You have campsites that are suddenly abandoned.
These events, which are called extinction level events, they reset the clock. They make everything start again. And this is why what happened in North America 12,800 years ago is so important, because that period, you'll just call it the Younger Dryas, and it's a 1,200-year period, but that period stands right in the foundations of what we think of as the beginnings, the origins of civilization.
Whether it's the dispersion of languages, the beginning of agriculture, the first cities, the domestication of animals, what you see over and over again is the same dates showing up, 8, 9, 10,000 years ago.
And as more and more evidence comes in, we realize how widespread it was. So they found evidence of the impacts as far south as Antarctica now. Previously, they were focused very much on North America. Now, as far south as Antarctica, as far east as Syria. This was truly a global event, and it changed the world. And I think, and it's my case, that it wiped our memory of a previous episode of human civilization, that right at the epicenter of this cataclysm was a civilization that we would regard as advanced, not a simple hunter-gatherer civilization, which was utterly wiped out.
Are you starting to see are you starting to pick up what I'm putting down? We are now looking at evidence. Not just a little bit of, circumstantial this, that, or whatever that could be, pieced together from just a few little occasional bits of oral history. No. We have scars carved into the very rock and foundation of our planet. I'd like to go back to this here. There's a great picture right here. And right here. So this is Graham and Randall. They're standing in the middle of the channeled scablands up in Montana. This is miles across. At least 3 miles across from end to end. This is an area where out of this rock, this is basalt rock. This is that black rock you see them standing on. And an amount of water that we cannot even begin to perceive suddenly melted in a flash and flooded downward towards the oceans. And for the amount of ice we're talking about, the ice caps of like the Ice Age civilization time frame, the Ice Age, as they were saying, some of these ice caps, which covered most of Europe, most of North America, and even parts of like the southern continents, and even South America. There's a great map, the Piri Reis map, that actually shows that it doesn't show the usual tip of South America. It actually connects with Antarctica. This is a map that was drawn from several other source maps. This was made in the 1500s, but even then, in the 1500s, go back to the 1800s, only 200 years ago in our time, nobody had even discovered Antarctica yet. Antarctica doesn't show up on maps, but suddenly, what is Antarctica doing? Not only connected to South America, but like in the middle of Central America, and it's also connected. And these ancient cultures, these different civilizations, somehow somebody had drawn Antarctica thousands of years, far beyond what we think of. And you have to think, the cataclysmic melting of all of this ice, you're talking about it would raise sea levels dramatically. And as he said, it's the combined, combined, you're talking about like the combined like mass of the United States, or it's like North America and Asia together, like all that amount of land that was above water suddenly going underwater. 400 feet the sea levels rose. in a matter of maybe a week to 2 weeks, 12,800 years ago. And where do you typically find that people build civilizations? Near water, near the oceans, near the shorelines. It is mind-boggling. So then it would stand to reason that if a large comet flies into our solar system, about the size of a small moon, suddenly it gets heated up by our star, Sol, the sun, as it's traveling through our solar system, and then suddenly it breaks up. Suddenly you have a cosmic shooting gallery, and the Earth is dead center, traveling right through the middle of it. 1,200 years of hell. As every year around the same time between, is like for about a few days in June and then a few days in the fall, we cross through this stream and suddenly we have massive amounts of cosmic debris just bombarding our planet for 1,200 years. And suddenly we're left to sit here and ask ourselves, suddenly things calm down. A lot of the bigger stuff kind of settles, everything settles into a bit more of a lax pace. Probably more of like the larger chunks move out of the solar system over this time frame. So now we still cross through this belt of debris every 6 months, basically, in June and in November. But our entire society, everything that we know, suddenly everything that is humankind, gone in an instant. Anatomically modern humans have been around for over 300,000 years. Put that into perspective. 300,000 years anatomically modern humans have been on this planet. And yet somehow science is trying to tell us today that only maybe the last 6,000 years we've discovered civilization, agriculture, industry, all of these things. Is it possible that we are a species with amnesia? Is it possible that an ancient advanced civilization that understood the stars, understood agriculture, understood how to do all of these like just mind-boggling things by those ancient standards that we don't even understand today, somehow this all happened? There are so many things that just when you start figuring in this time frame, they don't match. This time frame becomes this big blank slate of what the fuck happened. The building of the pyramids, the Great Sphinx, all of these things are showing up to be older than we think that they are. And they're all dating to this period of time in our history. But they've been built and rebuilt, worked and reworked and refurbished by cultures. And so many of these cultures we're finding now are saying that they never actually built these things. They inherited them from a previous advanced civilization. It starts to make you understand why suddenly we would have some kind of mass cultural remembrance of something bad happening, of death, and remembering and finding a way to celebrate and commemorate the celebration of the dead that reset the human species to zero in an instant. Yeah, absolutely, Nick. If one big solar flare today would put the world in chaos, imagine a freaking meteor. So Yeah, Excavator. It begs to ask the question: how did select pockets of humans survive these cataclysmic events? Well, that has led to a lot of speculation. I mean, now from what we're understanding, it wasn't like one big tidal wave of flood that covered the entire planet. There were still areas that were spared. Now, we're also finding places like Kuyu, and Kuyu is incredible. It's an underground city. And let me find it here. Turkey's underground city of 20,000 plus people. It's unfreaking believable. So what do they call it? A Carrington event. Carrington event is when the solar flare, like a mass coronal mass ejection, is what they call it when the sun disgorges a large radiation burst that can disrupt electronics. Shorter to Cook says, wonder why NASA was practicing blowing up meteors in space. Yeah. Nick says, humans are parasitic. We adapt to everything. We survive no matter what. Yep. Yep, JKD Buck. Yep, CME, coronal mass ejection. Yep, AP, hard to cover Everest. Yep, exactly. It was there back then. So, let me share this. So, this is Turkey's underground city of 20,000 people, Kuyu. Now, this is just like the outside of it. But you start to find that underground, there is an entire city, an entire network that was hacked out of this rock with copper chisels and hammers. This city they're finding is over 12,000 years old. Hacked out of the very bedrock. It was a shelter. They had these stones that could be moved into place to, seal off areas or whatnot. They had it all the way down to the water table. So there was fresh water. There was ventilation. So these people could breathe and cook, and they could basically stay down there. It was literally a primitive bomb shelter to protect humans inside from basically getting wiped out. So here's an interesting cross section of Kuyu. This is what the city looks like underground. You have the water table down here. They have access ways so they could gather water. You had living quarters. You had places for livestock. You had communal areas. They had latrines. It was a literal underground city. But what's interesting is that these were not actually occupied for an entire, like all the time. They were occupied upwards of maybe like part of the year. People would live above ground during most of the year. And then during the times when there would be potential, things falling from the sky, they would take shelter down here. It's incredible. Some more pictures from inside Kuyu. This is really cool. You'll enjoy this. So here's one of the stone, like the round stones they use to wall things off. But again, I mean, look at this. You'd think this was built, only a few years ago or in the last couple hundred years. No, this is thousands of years old. Excuse me. All right. So here's the thing that I wanted to make note of. So now we have the connection. Let's continue on down this kind of rabbit hole. We'll let there's a bit more information that Randall has here about this. Let's listen in on this. This is actually another from a recent Joe Rogan episode where they're talking about the evidence of the Younger Dryas impact.
Okay, so it was a little different back in 1969, but Eden Prairie was a location of an airport. Let me put this onto terrain. All right, here we go. And here we go. So this is the Minnesota River Valley. And I was standing, I actually went back and found a few years ago, found the spot I was standing, and it was right here on this bluff, looking into this valley. Now, if you go here, you can see there's another side to it over here. And if you look back here, you're going to see this is what's an underfit river. An underfit river is where the modern river is diminutive relative to the channel that it's flowing in. And the channel was part of what they call the spillway of Lake Agassiz, which was a gigantic meltwater lake that formed in that interval that Graham was just talking about. So this is the modern Minnesota River, which is a fairly substantial river, probably close to the Colorado here that runs through Austin. But you can see the channel. The channel is huge relative to the river. A few geologists have worked on it and concluded that the meltwater flow through here was 4,000 times greater than the modern flow of the Minnesota River. So anyways, I was standing here looking out into this, and what I saw was the modern river entrenched within a couple of banks, and then I'm looking at this huge channel, and I just had this impression that, was this a huge river channel? You know how, because see, when I was looking 3 miles across, there's another set of 200-foot high bluffs matching the ones that I was standing on. And then below me was the modern Minnesota River with its banks, which were like miniature versions of the bluffs. Now, it was a full decade before I actually came back to the idea as I was beginning to learn more about catastrophism, which was still very much in the seminal stages back in the 70s. You know, we've learned so much more about the catastrophic history of this planet since then. But then I began to think, well, and this was before I even knew about Glacial River Warren, it was called, which was the flow through here. And you can actually, Graham, we went there. If we chased.
We did indeed.
We did. Right up here by Ortonville is Big Stone City. So this is the southern outlet of Lake Agassiz. And this was one of the many outburst floods of gigantic flows of meltwater coming off the ice sheet. Big Stone City. Now, when you look at names of lakes and towns and places, oftentimes there's clues, like Big Stone City and Big Stone Lake. If you go there, there's big stones laying all over the landscape that were flushed out in this catastrophic draining of Lake Agassiz.
Because these drainings would have involved not just water, but icebergs.
Yes.
Turbulent flows of water filled with icebergs the size of oil tankers. And inside those icebergs, locked up, are huge chunks of rock. And eventually the iceberg melts and it releases the rock, and that's how you get the big stone.
I'd like to just take a moment here to just mention, as what Graham's talking about, icebergs the size of oil tankers. And also, yeah, the rocks that they're talking about getting deposited are called glacial erratics. Let me go ahead and find you some. So glacial erratic boulders. So you're talking about massive, massive chunks of rock that are found just seemingly out of nowhere. Here's a good example of one. This is the glacial erratic. That's a person standing next to it. That's a big friggin' rock. I say this picture is not quite as good, but yeah, also incredibly huge. Yep, and as JKD Buck mentions, balanced on other rocks. Yep, we have examples of that. I'm trying to grab one here. Yep, here we go. Absolutely massive chunks of rock that are being deposited in these spots because they're just grinding across the surface of the earth under these glaciers, and they're picked up and dropped off in icebergs as big as oil tankers. If that doesn't get your butt puckering, I don't know what does. Excuse me.
Yeah. And then the last place we went, Graham, was the potholes at St. Croix Falls. I'll zoom in here. And this is an interesting place. There's a constriction in the bedrock. This is hard basalt bedrock. And when you have water flow coming along, it's got a conservation of volume, so that if you have a narrow part of the channel, the water coming in as it's going into that constricted channel speeds up, because if you take measure of the water flow at any 2 points along the channel, it's going to be the same. Whether it's a wide channel with shallower water moving slower or a narrow channel with deeper water moving faster, the discharge through that channel is going to be the same. Well, what happens is if it comes into a constriction, it has to speed up then. When it speeds up, it becomes more erosive. And that's exactly what happened right here at Taylor's Falls. And right here at Interstate Park is a series of gigantic potholes. Now, these potholes are evidence of intense turbulence within swiftly moving deep water. In a minute here, I'll pull up. I've got a great shot.
Yep,
when Graham and I were
absolutely
there, I was in the bottom of one of these potholes, and Graham is peering over the rim. And it's a great shot because you can really get the sense of the scale. I'll pull it up here in a second. But if we go, where did this water come from? This water came from right up here, Lake Nipigon. That was the source of this water. And when you go south of Lake Nipigon, the whole landscape is channel scablands, just like Graham and I were seeing out in Washington. And this is very convincing evidence of really catastrophic water flows. And I've always thought it's interesting, or at least for the last decade or so, that if you look at the elevation of the land here, you look at the elevation of the land over here, it's the same. But if you go in the middle here, it's 500 to 1,000 feet lower. What happened here, there was a major discharge south out of Lake Nipigon, came down through.
And I think we should add that Lake Nipigon was discharging because it was filled up with water that came out of the ice cap and filled it up.
Yes.
What is the conventional explanation for these massive bluffs that are very far apart from each other with a relatively small river running through the middle?
Try as I might, I've never found an explanation. But you can look here at this, and this is pure what you call scabland, which is the result of major erosional, intense erosion, cutting out. This is a coulee, but
It looks like somebody's just been picking scabs off the skin of the land, and that was these water flows rushing through it, filled with icebergs and whole forests ripped up by their roots. Naturally, it looks like torn up scabs.
And so it's your assertion that this all came out of the cataclysm, that this all came out of the impacts, comet impacts?
James Teller, geologist, has dated these flows 12,800 to 12,900 years ago.
And how has he done that?
Radiocarbon dating primarily, by finding if you have a flood and it's picking up anything organic, bone, wood, whatever, and you look in those deposits and you sample, and the samples, let's say because it's a flood, what it's going to do, it's going to pick up younger and older material because it's washing away, it's excavating other land, and so what you do is you get enough datable material, and if it keeps coming up that the maximum age is a given age, that's probably when the flood happened, or a minimum age rather, not a maximum age. In other words, a flood might pick up stuff that's 15,000 years old and 12,000. Well, when did the flood happen? At 15,000 or 12,000? So what you do is you look for the youngest datable material, and that should usually give you a pretty good idea of when the flood happened. So James Teller has dated this overflow here, and again, it comes out perfectly consistent with the Younger Dryas.
Wow. And if you thought we're done, we're not. And Rose there with a 1 month membership chat. Yay, over a month membership. Awesome. All right. So now you have the question of like, okay, we have massive floods. That definitely, covers what we talked about early on with the Greek flood, word, cataclysmos. And now they also mention the destruction of the world by fire. As epikriosis. And there's an old English proverb that says, fire and water have no mercy. Well, if you're talking about evidence of a giant impact that literally not only causes this massive amount of flooding, well, it first has to do something to melt that water. And to do that, you need a massive amount of heat. And what's more able to do that than a comet or a meteor careening into our atmosphere and exploding over the ground? No, I'm not talking about impacting it directly. Airburst. These massive chunks of ice and rock that might be low density, they come into the atmosphere, they come crashing through, and at a certain point, their structure begins to crack, and they just explode. There's evidence of that, and it's in Arizona. But now we're finding more evidence of this exact same thing, phenomenon, happening in every corner of the world, in everywhere from the Middle East, Africa, North America, South America. It's everywhere. This is what we call the black mat layer. So this is actually in Murray Springs, which is the Clovis site, the Clovis civilization site in Arizona. So this is the Younger Dryas boundary, as they call it. So you see there is this layer. So this is the dirt, and you just see this line. That's not a separation like a shadow. That is actually a layer of ash and just charred material that is in the actual layer of the soil. JKD Buck, is the black mat layer all over the planet? Yes, it is. But what is more interesting is not so much the black mat layer like being there, because I mean that's huge in and of itself, but what's in it. So in a study of the black mat layer, they are finding a number of incredible materials. And let me grab something here. So, okay. Okay. And it looks like I'm not going to be able to find a good graphic for this, but okay. So when they actually are testing this, when they actually take samples of this black mat layer, there's a number of startling things that they begin to find. They find nanodiamonds, which are literally microscopic diamonds that are created out of immense heat and pressure, but instantaneously. Those only happen in a cosmic impact event, such as a meteor or asteroid slamming into the Earth. You have carbon spherules, which are these little spheroid little particles that are just made of, all kinds of different like bits of carbon that get caught up in everything. And then you have trace amount, like statistically extremely high trace amounts of material like iridium. Iridium is a material, is a metal that is almost all of it on Earth is found in cosmic impact events. Oh yes. If you love geology, you really need to watch a lot more of Randall's work. And yeah, it's incredible. So you have nanodiamonds, you have carbon spherules, you have iridium. All three of these are dead ringers in this black mat layer right here. And this layer is appearing everywhere, all over the planet, even in ice core samples in Greenland and Antarctica and even Siberia. They're appearing everywhere. And they're all showing the same cosmic impact traces. So that leads a lot of people to ask the question. So what is the historical context for this? Yeah, JKD Buck, we got smoked, didn't we? Well, that is part of the reason why I like Graham Hancock's explanation of saying that we are a species with amnesia. We forgot the world that came before us because it was wiped out. And I want to go back to an interesting mythological telling of this. I want to go to the myth of Phaeton, which is one of the in the Greek in the Greek myths. So Phaeton drove the chariot of his father Helios, and as with all mythologies, they have a grain of truth. It's a different way of telling history. Phaeton, Greek, shining or radiant in Greek mythology, the son of Helios, the sun god, and a woman or nymph variously identified as Selene, Prote, or Rhode. The most influential extant version of the story, found in Ovid's Metamorphoses, books 1 and 2, seems to echo the plot of Euphrates' Phaeton. Now, partially known from papyrus discoveries, taunted with illegitimacy, Phaeton appealed to his father, who swore to prove his paternity by giving him whatever he wanted. Phaeton asked to be allowed to drive the chariot of the sun through the heavens for a single day. Helios, bound by his oath, had let him make the attempt. Phaeton set off, but was entirely unable to control the horses of the sun chariot, which came too near the earth and began to scorch it. To prevent further damage, Zeus hurled a thunderbolt at Phaeton, who fell to the earth at the mouth of the Arundonus River, that later identified as the Po. Sorry about that. So, essentially, the way that it shakes out is that Phaeton is this supposed son of Helios. He goes to Helios and he says, "If you are really my father, you'll do whatever I ask." And in Helios, because he is actually his son, says, "Yeah, okay, I will do whatever you want." And so Helios is bound by this oath. Phaeton asks to drive the chariot of the sun. So in the Greek mythology, Helios, the sun god, rides his fiery chariot across the sky. That is the sun from east to west. And that's the way of things. But in this, he says that Phaeton couldn't control the heavenly steeds, and the sun came too close to the ground and began to burn and scorch the earth. Now, what's interesting is that during this time frame, when we're talking about, as we go back to what we talked about earlier, the meteors, the Pleiades, and the constellation Taurus, the shoulder of the bull, when we are heading into this when we are heading into this meteor stream, we're heading into this meteor stream in this time of the year, in October and early November, During the daytime hours, the sun is right in the path of the Pleiades, right in the path of the constellation Taurus. And so, when this would look like, if you are, it makes it really hard for us to find and calculate if there are other stellar objects coming toward us, because they would be looking at like they would be coming straight out of the sun. So, again, in this ancient tradition, this ancient story, it's like the sun got too close to the ground and began to burn everything because it was a piece of the sky, a chunk of debris, this meteor falling and burning itself too close to the ground, causing all this destruction and mayhem. In which case, Zeus hurls a thunderbolt, kills Phaeton, throws him to the ground. He crashes into the ground, and everything is destroyed. Suddenly, these old ancient folklore myths don't sound so hyperbolic anymore. What if this, the myth of Phaeton, is actually just a rendition, a parable, a story that encapsulates what happened to us a long time ago? And we don't have to look far for historical context to something similar, because we only have to go back a few years, and I've got examples. Give me just a sec to grab something here. So let's turn back the clocks a little bit, just for an example's sake. Now this, so let's go back to 1908, Tunguska. Now, the Tunguska event happened in June of 1908, which happens to be around the time that we travel through the other side of the Taurid meteor stream. Again, we travel through the Taurid meteor stream twice a year, in June and in November. In 1908, a rock entered our atmosphere, fell to the earth, exploded over Siberia, and detonated with the force of 15 megatons. Now, how big is 15 megatons? Well, let me just go ahead and explain. So, 15 megatons is an incredible amount of force. So, 15 megatons compared to Hiroshima. So 15 megatons is equivalent to 1,000 times more powerful than the bomb dropped on Hiroshima. This was not a nuclear bomb. This was a chunk of rock falling through our atmosphere at over 54,000 miles an hour. Yeah. That kind of makes you think there for a second, doesn't it? Tunguska happened in 1908, and 115 years ago, I mean, that was almost hard to wrap your mind around. It flattened trees for miles in every direction. Completely destroyed everything. Thankfully, the area in which it happened is very sparsely populated. But there were people that witnessed this on the ground, and one of these days I'm going to do a full show just on the Tunguska event, because there's a lot to unpack with it. But the Tunguska blast actually was an airburst type explosion. So this thing broke apart in the air and exploded about 5 to 10 kilometers above the ground. And it completely wiped out everything for miles in every direction. In fact, this is the blast site of Tunguska today. You see this area right here? About a couple of miles above this one spot? This thing exploded right there, miles above it. And somehow, yet, over 115 years later, nothing will grow hardly in this entire spot. Yep. Dad said Dad was there, so it was a mess for sure in World War II with the bombs. I can't imagine a rock like that. And funny enough, it was a small rock. Comparatively speaking, the Tunguska event, the rock itself was only about 50 to 100 meters wide, which that sounds big, but in the context of other space debris, it's actually quite small. So, let's see, 100 meters, 2 feet. So 100 meters, that's 328 feet. So, I mean, it's a big rock. But by this celestial scale of things, it's actually quite small. There's way bigger rocks out there by the tens of millions in our solar system. We're just one big cosmic shooting gallery. And as Nicholas cleverly brings up, remember the meteor that exploded over Russia a few years ago that injured over 1,000 people and shattered windows in a mile radius? Not even a kiloton. Yeah, we're talking about Chelyabinsk. Yes, Chelyabinsk, the Chelyabinsk meteor. And you know what? That one, Chelyabinsk was... So Chelyabinsk was about 19 meters. So not even hardly, 1/5 of the size of the Tunguska meteor. Let's watch what it did. Because thankfully, we have Russian dash cams to thank for that. And yes, before you ask, when did Chelyabinsk happen? February 15th of 2013. 10 years ago, this meteor exploded over Russia. That was 1/5 of the blast of Tunguska. 10 years ago. And I wonder how many of you actually even have heard of it.
Нихуя себе, это что такое? О, нихуя метеорит, блядь.
Внимание,
Ебануться. Нихуя себе.
Я сейчас подойду, подожди.
The blast wave, the pressure wave, just blew in all those windows. And what you're hearing, those bangs, is just the extra, like, bangs coming off of this. Yes, 1/5, not 1/5 of the blast, 1/5 of the size. That's what I meant. Yes. And you can see where the air burst happened, where it has that like bright contrail. Right there. You see? That's where the air burst occurred. Back it up just a nudge. There's the explosion. Boom, boom. Look how it just completely turns everything completely bright like that. And there's a clip right here. Warning to headphone users. This is going to be loud. So 3, 2, 1, you're warned.
Ебать, а! Что это хуйня? Никит, что это такое? Бомбардировка, нахуй! Артподготовка, блин!
Yeah, this is from inside an office, and just look at the blast, what the blast wave does.
То, что ему отказали в рукопожатии, видно, его мало смутило. А вот мог...
Yeah, here you go. Boom. Over 1,000 people were injured in that explosion. And that, the thing that did that was 1/5 of the size of Tunguska. Now, when we're talking about the Younger Dryas, we're talking about impact events that are on the scale of Tunguska and far larger. Explosions that are literally capable of setting the entire planet on fire. Yeah, it is hard to comprehend how fast that meteor is coming in. It's in the upwards of like 65,000 miles an hour. It is so fast that it is literally smashing all of the air out of its way. Incredible amounts of power. I got one final clip for y'all. Got all the Randall you can handle. There we go. All right.
Succession of glacial interglacial oscillations. Those shifts are quite dramatic.
Can you tell us what that means? Glacial, interglacial oscillation.
Okay, that would be a good segue into our first slide.
Okay.
Can we look at our first slide? So there's Ice Age Earth. Now that's what the Earth would have looked like 15 to 20,000 years ago. What you've got to do is consider that northwestern Europe, mantled in ice, Northern America, mantled in ice up to 1.5 miles thick, reached from the Atlantic to the Pacific, all of Canada was buried under ice.
Still is.
No, Canada's not.
I'm just kidding.
Well,
I like to mock
intellectually, perhaps some of the. Yeah, no, you had me. What? Okay.
Sorry.
No, Tech Tucker. It's not still buried.
So there's no human civilization in Western Europe, or
Well, that becomes the question. Would there have been civilization in, say, unglaciated? Certainly wasn't any civilization in the area of the glaciation. Now, when you have a cycle of glaciation coming, it pretty much obliterates everything that was there before. The climate changes associated with the transition into an ice age and out of an ice age are almost inconceivably extreme. They really, I mean, you're talking about at the end of the ice age. You know, this was something that used to be conceived as taking 100,000 years. Well, as our dating improved, it went from 100,000 to 50,000, from 50,000 to 20,000. Radiocarbon dating, became a thing in the 1950s. And as we began to learn more, we started finding out, well, wait a minute, there were forests growing in Canada 40 to 50,000 years ago. How's that possible? Well, if there was, a mile of ice over Canada. What happened is the span of time between these events just kept contracting and contracting. Then in the 1980s, 1990s, we began to extract high resolution ice cores from Greenland, from Antarctica, from mountain glaciers. The story they told was of climate change that occurred inconceivably fast, where you might have had 10 to 12 degrees centigrade, which is close to like 18 degrees Fahrenheit, literally in less than 5 years. Now, this is very demonstrative.
Really?
Oh, yeah. I wish, if we had 4 or 5 hours, Tucker, to go, I would have brought a whole lot more material to show you this, but yeah, I'm not exaggerating. These are,
if that happened now, you would have a lot of dead people.
We're screwed. Yeah. If that happened now, yeah. So what you had, there's this period called, you might have heard of it, the Younger Dryas. It was this episode that brought the ice age to an end. Now, because of astronomical forces, the Earth, its tilt, the shape of its orbit, and so on, its distance from the sun, there are gradually accumulating changes in the amount of thermal energy reaching the surface of the Earth. These are called the Milankovitch forces. Okay, so generally the thought was these Milankovitch forces what were behind the period of glaciation and deglaciation. The problem is they play out over tens of thousands of years. We're looking at episodes now that happened within a few thousand years, because if you go back to that slide we were just looking at, 13,000 years ago, 14,000 years ago, you had an enormous mass of ice. And a few thousand years later, it's gone. Now, in order to get rid of that ice, it requires energy. You don't melt 6 million cubic miles of ice without some source of energy to do the work. And that's the conundrum. It was first identified in the early 1970s. Once they had radiocarbon dating in hand and they saw how fast the disappearance of the ice was, they're scratching their heads and go, wait a second. How could it, 5,000, 6,000 years? We thought it was 100,000 years. But now radiocarbon dating is showing us that it has happened 1/10 or 1/20th of the time. How do you explain that? They called it the energy paradox, because in 73, 74, there were several conferences held, several papers written in which they identified the energy paradox, and they couldn't come up with an answer. They said there's a mistake in the data somewhere, or in the modeling, we're going to put it on a shelf and we'll get back to it. They've never really gotten back to it. The point is that this energy had to have come from somewhere. So what are the possibilities?
Wait, so the energy that melted these miles of glacial ice that covered a lot of the Earth's surface, we don't know that happened. It wasn't just because it got sunnier out.
No, unless the sun was involved on some level exponentially beyond anything we've experienced.
Right, that it's not now.
Right.
But it wasn't just like we had a hot August one year.
No.
Okay.
No. But what has happened in the interim is now, in 2007, there was a paper published that has ignited firestorm of controversy about what happened to the great megafauna, these great, because at the time all of this was going on when those ice sheets were over North America. You had this tremendous megafauna in the world. You had the mammoths, and you had the giant cave bears. You had the Irish elk with 10 and 12 foot antler spans. You had sloths the size of elephants. You had lions the size of horses. You had dire wolves. I mean, the list went on and on and on. And with a geological eye blink, they were gone. To put that in perspective, the number of species of megafauna that disappeared within this period of deglaciation, 11 to 13.
Deglaciation.
Where the ice has disappeared.
During the melting.
During the melting. Yeah, exactly. You got it. During the melting. Over 100 species disappeared worldwide.
Big animals.
Big animals. Megafauna is defined as an animal that's more than 44 kilograms or 100 pounds roughly in body weight. So we're all mega mammals, right? But the ones today, the lions and tigers and bears and everything else, deer and antelope and whatever, go ahead, make the whole list. About 110 to 120 species right in there, depending on how you divide it up. That was about the number of species that went extinct during this episode of deglaciation. Now, think about that.
Like every big mammal on Earth just goes extinct.
Well, half of all the big, because the other half are the ones that are on the planet today. You know, the giant American bison was 6 feet tall at the shoulder. Now, I don't know if you've ever been out in a herd of bison.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're impressive beasts.
Yeah.
Now imagine a bison that's twice the body mass. So that, it seemed to selectively affect really large animals, and that makes sense because if you have a tremendous amount of habitat destruction, what that means is it's going to affect the food supply. The larger animals that require more food, that have a longer gestation period of animals of young in the womb, that have a longer period of time of requirement of nurturing until they're viably independent, all of that is longer. So if you have habitat destruction, it's going to selectively go to the top of the food chain. Whereas the smaller animals, the scavengers, these things, they're going to have a field day because there's going to be a lot of carrion that they're going to be able to eat. And we know, like, that in place, you may have heard, about woolly mammoths that have been found quick frozen, flash frozen in the permafrost, which is still a mystery.
What does that mean? Why?
Because nobody, how do you explain? Well, Clarence Birdseye, who was the inventor of the fast flash freezing of food, right? Birdseye Foods. He was commissioned to do a study. He looked at it and said, well, wait a second, we're looking at, like in the Beresovka mammoth that was discovered in 1901 with some of the warming that came out of the Little Ice Age. There was a bank of permafrost up on the Beresovka River in Siberia that collapsed, exposed this woolly mammoth that had been frozen. Now, in this mammoth's mouth is flowering plants that it had been eating, right? The mammoth was sitting on his haunches with both back hips broken, right? There was something like 20 different varieties of plants and sedges and things in the stomach that was undigested, right? So what he looked at is said, how quickly, and the whole mammoth, I mean, it still had marbled flesh. The skin was intact. I mean, I've got pictures of it that were taken in my slideshows and stuff. I didn't bring them here today, but you had, so he looked at it and he said, well, the contents of the stomach is not even putrefied. The entire content, even the cells of the mammoth are frozen. So how fast would it take a 6-ton mammoth to freeze that the contents of the stomach would not even putrefy? And I think what he came up with, if I remember, it's been a while since I've read the studies, like 10 hours. So if you're going to freeze a woolly mammoth, 6 tons of body mass in 10 hours, what kind of temperature change does that require? Well, so the animal is eating flowering plants. And literally it appears that moments later, he's slammed onto his haunches. His penis was erect within the permafrost, which is a sign that he was rapidly suffocated. So he slammed to his haunches, presumably buried.
Is that a symptom of rapid suffocation?
Yes, under pressure, great deal of pressure. So he was buried instantly and then frozen. And that's where he's been for thousands of years until the planet warmed a bit in early 1900s and this bank of permafrost collapsed, exposed the mammoth's head. And it was a whole year later before scientists had gotten there to study this carcass. And by that time, wolves had devoured the flesh off of the skull. But they were able to exhume and, I guess, preserve it to some extent in the Leningrad Museum. And there's photographs of it, just how it was found. So that's, it's those kinds of mysteries that really.
So what is what's your guess on that?
All right. So again, there we go. So what we're looking at here, we're looking at a time frame, a moment in time, approximately 12,800 years ago, where the earth was bombarded, destroyed. Most of the animals and plants were killed off. A large chunk of them were. Humans were decimated. And basically what it appears, according to all the evidence that we've seen, it appears that this scar, this cultural memory, has been preserved over all these thousands of years through our culture, culminating in a celebration of the dead, celebration of, or a festival of the dead, a festival to remind us of the end of the world that happened over 12,000 years ago. So when I sit here and I tell you that everything that you've been led to believe about Halloween and what it means is wrong, I mean that we're only just now in this time frame, within the last probably 20 to 50 years, we're starting to finally uncover the truth. That we're not talking about just ancient beliefs and folklore and myths that led to some belief in a time of celebrating the dead. We're talking about a cultural memory. We are talking about a memory that is ingrained within our species. Something that we have never quite been able to fully put our finger on. But now we are. We're finally starting to piece together that all the iconography that we've put onto this holiday, all of the beliefs and things of what we've seen and what has culminated together to what we now know as Halloween, all comes from a singular source. All the roads, all the branches, all of the loose threads all come back to that time period of cataclysm between 11,600 and 12,800 years ago. And that, my friends, is how everything that you thought you knew about Halloween is wrong. Hey, Sherry, got here so late, I'm going to start over again as I fall asleep and watch again tomorrow. Awesome. Well, buckle up because you're in for a wild ride. Shorter to Cook one says, did they find any ash in the layers where the mammoth was? I wonder if it was forest, not ice back then. Yes, that's what they're saying, is that it was buried in a layer of permafrost. So essentially, this area where they found this dead mammoth, this mammoth was thrown to the ground, killed, suffocated, and then flash frozen. And then on top of that, we have now evidence to suggest that it was buried by a large influx of either mud or water or something that buried it quickly. And then, of course, because of the way that the temperatures are up there, frozen and preserved in the permafrost for over 10,000 years. Wild to think about. Thanks, HT. Thank you, Sherry. Folks, that is all I have for this evening. That is everything that I've got for this topic. Now, regarding the Younger Dryas, the megalithic structures, and all of this stuff that all leads back to this belief, where this root comes from, there's a lot out there to unpack. So, if y'all are interested, I got some homework for you. So, highly recommend, I'm going to drop some links in the chat here for you all to go and check out at your leisure. Let's see. So, first is over on this channel called After School, where Randall talks about all of this stuff, and it's the origin of Halloween. Let's see. There's that one. Oops, almost forgot. There we go. Origin of Halloween. Also, gonna highly recommend that you guys go over, check out some of the back catalog from the Joe Rogan Experience, where he has Randall and Graham Hancock on. They both are amazingly knowledgeable on this topic. And Joe Rogan. So yeah, this is JRE 872. They've done several appearances together, so highly recommend you go check all of those out, especially their talk about the ancient civilizations, lost technology, the pyramids, and amazingly, we just got a new update coincidentally today that today over on Spotify on Joe Rogan's show, Graham Hancock came by and did a show, 3 hours, sitting down, talking about more of this ancient technology, ancient structures, and this exact topic. So highly recommend you guys go give that a check out over on Spotify as well. And for those of you out there who have Netflix, please definitely go out there, go over to Netflix and watch Graham Hancock's show, Ancient Apocalypse. It is amazing, and it is getting a second season. So season 2 should be coming out sometime next year, and I am so looking forward to it. It is an amazingly well done show. If you like this topic, you need to go watch Ancient Apocalypse. You need to watch the Joe Rogan Experiences with Randall and Graham. You also need to go ahead and watch the Randall's Origin of Halloween. But my voice is failing. It's time for me to go ahead and split. So, hey, Jacob Beats, good to see you. Went for the expert, but I figured I'd break from the crowd, say howdy. Awesome. All right. That is all I've got for this evening. Thank you all so much for watching. For those of you on the replay crew, I highly appreciate all of you. For everybody out there, whether you're watching on YouTube, Rumble, X, whatever, please definitely hit the like button. If you're new here, hit the subscribe. I am driving over on my YouTube channel to try and hit 1,000 subscribers by this Christmas. So if you could help me out sharing this video, sharing my information out there, I would appreciate it. If you want to directly support the channel on my YouTube, like right on the homepage, there's a link to my Cash App. You can also drop super chats. If you're watching on the replay, you can use the super thanks feature. Nothing is required. Everything is appreciated because it goes right back into this channel, making more and better content for all of y'all. All right, folks. Thank you all. I love y'all. I appreciate you. Have a great evening. And I appreciate you coming and hanging out with me over here for the night over on The Edge of Reality.
You ever wonder why we're here? You ever notice that the information that we're being fed doesn't always add up to the truth? Do you ever look out your window at night when the rain's falling down? You ever look down the street and wonder what is going on around you? You ever look out at night and ask yourself, is this all that I am? Where am I? What am I? Is this all there is? Is this real life? As technology continues to bring us closer together, it also tears us further apart. We watch the skies and look at the planet around us and its natural beauty as it continues to march forward on and on and on, unending, unceasing, unwavering. And yet our world, everything that we've built crumbles around us. We wonder, is this it? Is there more? There's gotta be. We can search. We want to learn. We want to understand. We want to see all that. we can see, know all that we can know. We want to look out there. We want to peek behind the veil. We want to ask the questions that nobody will answer. We want to light those fires, the sparks that ignite a curiosity in us. And we ask ourselves, what is out beyond all of that? Beyond the edge of reality?